Welcome to English Lab. This presentation is about punctuation. In this presentation, we are going to focus on commas and semicolons. These can both be quite challenging to use, and you will need to use both of them all the time in your university writing. So firstly, let's talk about commas. The comma is one of the most commonly used punctuation marks in English. Unfortunately, commas are often used incorrectly. Here are some examples of comma. Commas in lists. You can use commas if you are listing 3 or more nouns or verbs. For example, David bought apples, oranges, bananas, and pears from the fruit shop. Apples, comma, oranges, comma, bananas, and pears. We are listing 4 nouns here. I enjoy dancing, reading, listening to music, and singing in my free time. In this second example, we're listing 4 verbs. As you can see, in the first example, we did not put a comma before and. In the second example, we did. So which one is correct? Generally speaking, in British English, you do not put a comma before the final and. In American English, you do. It is your choice whether you do or not, but you must be consistent. Let's talk about commas with dependent clauses. If you are not familiar with dependent clauses, go back to our English Lab presentation about clauses and sentence types. This will help you understand this section. Dependent clauses must be used with independent clauses because they are not complete on their own. For example, although it was raining. This is a dependent clause. It needs another part for it to make sense. Dependent clauses can be placed at the end or at the beginning of sentences. When placing dependent clauses at the beginning of sentences, use a comma, like this. Although it was raining, comma, we went to the beach. Now this is a complete sentence because we have the dependent clause, although it was raining, followed by a comma, and then we have the independent clause, we went to the beach. You could also do it this way. We went to the beach although it was raining. This is the same meaning, and it's a perfect sentence. However, in this case, because the dependent clause is at the end of the sentence, we don't need to use a comma. Let's talk about commas with coordinating conjunctions. The coordinating conjunctions are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. These conjunctions connect 2 simple sentences to make a compound sentence. For example, I worked hard on my assignment yesterday, but I haven't finished it yet. But is the coordinating conjunction, and before that, there is a comma. She stayed out until midnight, so she fell asleep in class the next morning. So is the coordinating conjunction, and before that, we have a comma. We can also use commas with introductory comments. Linking words, sequencing words, or other connective adverbs are followed by a comma. These are words like consequently, however, moreover, additionally. There's lots of these. For example, however, we decided to wait on the investment until next quarter. However is followed by a comma. Finally, let's take a look at what all this means for the future. Finally is followed by a comma. We can also use commas with non-defining relative clauses. There are 2 types of relative clauses. Defining relative clauses provide essential information. Non-defining relative clauses provide additional information which is not essential to understanding. We use commas to show non-defining relative clauses. For example, Sam, who sits behind me in class, is from the UK. Sam is from the UK is the essential information in this sentence. Who sits behind me in class is the non-essential information, so this is the non-defining relative clause. It needs to be separated from the rest of the sentence by a comma on either side. Here's another example. My house, which was built in the 1920s, is the oldest in my street. The non-defining relative clause is which was built in the 1920s. This needs a comma on either side to separate it from the essential part of the sentence. One of the most common errors is called a comma splice. It looks like this. I like Coke, comma, I hate Pepsi. You cannot join independent clauses with just a comma. In this case, it would be correct instead to use a semicolon to separate them. Now let's talk about semicolons. To link two independent clauses that are closely related in meaning, just like the example we saw on the previous slide, we should use a semicolon. For example, I like Coke, I hate Pepsi. In this case, we have the two independent clauses separated by a semicolon. These two clauses are both closely related in meaning, so it's okay to do that. Here is another example. University is challenging, attendance is essential. Independent clause, semicolon, independent clause. We can also use a semicolon before linking words, sequencing words, or other connective adverbs. We talked about these before. These are words like consequently, however, moreover, furthermore. So what you do is, you put the semicolon before the sequencing word and a comma afterwards, like in this example. The students enjoyed participating in the research project, however, the results were insignificant. Our linking word in this sentence is however. Before however, we use the semicolon, after it, we use the comma. Here's another example. There was a large earthquake in Nepal, consequently, the economy of the country suffered. Our linking word is consequently. Before that, we have a semicolon. After, we have a comma. This is the end of our presentation about punctuation. Please return to English Lab for more presentations.